Sebastian, men in our family need a wife with the right background, not some insignificant girl who makes a living decorating houses. Madame Vivian Lauren's voice cut through the grand ballroom like a sharpened blade, cloaked in the guise of polite conversation yet dripping with quiet disdain around her. The finely dressed women of Paris's elite exchanged knowing glances, their lips curled in thinly veiled amusement as their eyes lingered on Isabella. The room sparkled with golden chandeliers reflecting the crystal glasses of aged wine, but to Isabella it felt suffocating, like stepping into an arena where she was the only prey. She stood beside Sebastian, her fingers laced with his, gripping tightly as if holding on to the last shreds of security. The man she loved didn't defend her. His hand twitched in hers, his jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Not when his mother dismissed Isab's career as meaningless, not when another woman, a socialite draped in designer silk, smirked and whispered, "Some women really don't know their place, do they?" Not when his father gave an approving nod to his wife's every word. The realization settled in Isabella's stomach like a lead weight. She didn't belong here. Not in their world, not in their eyes, and perhaps deep down Sebastian had never truly believed she did either. Months later, when she found out she was pregnant with twins, Isabella thought it would change everything. Sebastian had held her close that night, whispering reassurances that their love could withstand any storm. She had believed him. She had wanted to believe him. But when the time came when she lay exhausted in the hospital bed, her body still aching from bringing their children into the world, he was not there to hold her. Instead, he arrived with a neatly pressed suit, sorrow in his eyes and a folder in his hands. Isabella's heart clenched. "I'm sorry," he murmured, but the words felt hollow. She reached for his hand, expecting warmth, expecting love. Instead, he pulled away and placed the folder in front of her. "Divorce papers." Her breath caught. "Sebastian, what is this?" His gaze dropped as if ashamed, but his voice remained firm. "My mother was right, you and the twins will be better off without me." A bitter laugh bubbled in her throat. Without him. He hadn't even asked about the babies. He hadn't even held them. There was no hesitation, no remorse, just a man fulfilling his duty to the empire that bore his name. Sebastian Lauren walked out of that hospital room without ever looking back, leaving Isabella alone with 2 newborns and a future that had just collapsed around her. Madame Vivian Lauren never spared a second thought for the 2 grandchildren who bore her family's blood. She had gotten what she wanted. Isabella erased from the Lauren family's pristine legacy, discarded like an old trinket unworthy of their empire. But she wasn't satisfied with merely casting Isabella aside. No, she would make sure that the woman who had dared to love her son would never rise again. Isabella had barely recovered from childbirth when the first blow came. She had expected to return to her position at the interior design firm she had worked at for years, to rebuild the life she had before Sebastian. But as soon as she stepped out of the hospital, reality struck like a cold slap. A letter arrived, formal and impersonal. "We regret to inform you that your services are no longer required." Confused and desperate, she called her manager, hoping for an explanation. The answer was chilling in its simplicity. Madame Lauren made a few calls, he admitted in a hushed tone, almost afraid to be associated with her. "No one wants to be on the wrong side of the Lauren family, Isabella. It's best if you move on." Move on. She clutched her newborns in her arms, their tiny bodies warm against her chest, and realized there was nowhere to move on to. The next hit came swiftly. The apartment she and Sebastian had shared, the place she had once called home, was no longer hers. It had always been under the Lauren family's name, and with the divorce finalized, the eviction notice arrived before she had even left the hospital. With no income and no safety net, she had no choice but to pack up whatever few belongings she could carry and leave. By the time she found a place to stay, it was far from the luxurious life she had once known. The apartment was a cramped single-room rental in a rundown part of the city, barely big enough for one person, let alone a mother and 2 newborns. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and at night she could hear the sounds of shouting from the streets below. But it had a roof, it had a door that locked. It would have to be enough. Then came the worst part, the slow, agonizing descent into complete despair. She had no job, no savings, no one to turn to. Every morning was a brutal game of survival. She would wake up exhausted, her body still aching from labor, only to face the crushing reality of her situation. Some days she had to choose between buying diapers or feeding herself. She learned how to stretch a single meal over an entire day. She would drink tap water to fill her stomach so she wouldn't feel the hunger gnawing at her insides. She cut up old bed sheets to use as baby blankets because she couldn't afford to buy new ones. And yet the world did not stop for her suffering. She applied for jobs, hundreds of them, but rejection came swiftly. No one wanted to hire a single mother with 2 newborns. Employers didn't even try to sugarcoat their reasoning. We need someone who can be fully committed to the role. You have childcare responsibilities that will be a problem. We're looking for someone more flexible. She knew what they really meant. You are a liability, you are not worth the risk. The weight of her failures crushed her every day. She was running out of money, running out of time, running out of hope. There was no one to hold her up. Sebastian, he was gone, living his privileged life without a second thought about the woman he left behind. The Lawrence, they had erased her, treating her like she never existed. Friends, she had none. The circles she had once been part of had closed their doors to her the moment she lost her status as Madame Lawrence's daughter-in-law. She was truly completely alone. The nights were the worst. Both babies would wake crying for food, for warmth, for comfort. She would drag herself up half delirious from exhaustion, rocking them until they calmed. Then one would fall asleep and the other would start crying again. Some nights she barely slept at all. Some nights she would sit on the cold floor, her knees pulled to her chest, and wonder if she could do this. One night, as the rain lashed against the window, drowning the city in a relentless storm, Isabella reached her breaking point. She sat at the edge of the bed, her arms wrapped around her thin frame, listening to the sound of her baby's soft breaths. The apartment was dark save for the dim glow of a street lamp outside. She felt empty, hollow, as if she had already disappeared. The thought came unbidden, creeping into her mind like a whisper in the dark. What if I just let go? She squeezed her eyes shut, hating herself for even thinking it. And then she looked down, 2 tiny faces peaceful in sleep, their breath steady, their small hands curled into fists. They had no one but her. If she gave up, if she let the darkness win, who would protect them, who would fight for them? And in that moment a spark of defiance ignited inside her. No one is coming to save me, she whispered to the silence. But I will save myself. If you loved this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to bring you more heartwarming stories almost every day. Thank you for being part of our community. See you in the next one. The morning light seeped through the curtains of Isabella's tiny apartment, illuminating the scattered remnants of another sleepless night. The twins had finally settled into a fitful sleep, their soft breaths filling the silence. Isabella sat at the wobbly kitchen table, staring at the bills stacked high in front of her, their presence suffocating. She had exhausted every job opportunity, every desperate plea for employment met with the same cold rejection. No one wanted a single mother of 2 newborns who couldn't work late hours or be at their beck and call. If the world refused to offer her a way forward, she would carve one out herself. She tapped the edge of a worn-out pencil against the table, her mind racing through every skill, every ounce of experience she possessed. Her hands had always known how to create. Before her life had unraveled, before she had been cast out of the Lauren name, she had been a designer, someone who could turn an empty space into a warm, beautiful home. That had been stripped from her, but her talent remained. And now, with no safety net, no family to fall back on, and no one to rely on but herself, she knew that her survival depended on it. Her fingers moved instinctively, sketching out a design on the back of an old envelope. A crib, simple, elegant, something timeless that would cradle a child in safety and beauty. She stared at it, the idea settling into her bones, the possibility sparking the first flicker of hope she had felt in months. If she could build this, if she could create something worth selling, she could claw her way out of the hole she had been forced into. It was a fraile idea, one born of desperation, but it was hers. The following days were a blur of relentless effort. She scraped together what little savings she had left, just enough to buy raw materials, cheap wood, a few basic tools, child-safe varnish. She had never built furniture herself, but she had watched artisans work, studied the way they carved and shaped. If she could design it, she could learn to craft it. In the dim light of her apartment, she worked, sanding down the rough edges, cutting, assembling, adjusting with trial and error. The blisters on her hands grew, her muscles ached from exhaustion, but when she finally stepped back and looked at what she had created, a perfectly sturdy handcrafted baby crib, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. But making it was one thing, selling it was another battle entirely. She took photos with the shaky camera on her phone, doing her best to make the details visible despite the poor lighting in her apartment. She set up a small online store, uploading the images, writing a heartfelt description of the care she put into each piece, hoping that anyone would take a chance on her work. Days passed, then weeks, nothing. She visited baby boutiques across Paris, walking through neighborhoods she had once strolled as a Lauren, now as an outsider begging for a chance. She presented her designs, tried to pitch her story, but the response was always the same. "We only carry established brands. Customers expect high-end names. It's a lovely idea, but we don't take risks on unknown businesses." Every door slammed in her face, every rejection chipped away at the fragile hope she was holding on to. Determined not to fail, she turned back to online sales, listing her work on local marketplaces, hoping to bypass the boutique gatekeepers. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, an order came through. A woman had requested a crib for her newborn, and Isabella poured everything into making it perfect. She wrapped it carefully, arranged for delivery, and waited for payment. It never came. The woman vanished, ignoring her messages, her profile deactivated. Isabella had been scammed. She sat in the quiet of her apartment, staring at the crib she had built with so much care, and felt the crushing weight of failure pressing against her chest. How was she supposed to keep going when every step forward was met with a wall, when every effort was reduced to nothing? Her reality hadn't changed. She was still broke, still alone, still struggling to keep her babies fed. There were nights when she rocked them to sleep, her own stomach empty, too tired to cry. There were mornings when she questioned if she was foolish for believing she could build something from nothing. But she kept working. She juggled motherhood with the endless grind of entrepreneurship, learning as she went. Mornings were spent tending to her twins, afternoons were for designing and crafting, nights were for research, how to price products, how to market them, how to build a business when the world refused to take her seriously. She found moments in between diaper changes and lullabies to answer customer inquiries, to refine her listings, to teach herself the business side of creation. And then when she least expected it, everything changed. A notification lit up her phone, a message from a past customer, one of the few who had purchased her crib. "I just wanted to say thank you. Your work is beautiful. I've shared your store with my mom's group and everyone loves it." Isabella smiled, touched by the kindness, but she didn't think much of it. She had received words of encouragement before, but they had never led to real change. Then her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Order after order flooded in. People were commenting on her store, sending messages, inquiring about custom pieces. Confused, she scrolled through her notifications until she found the answer. A well-known parenting influencer had shared her work, an entire post dedicated to how much she adored Isabella's handcrafted cribs. The post had been shared thousands of times, spreading like wildfire across social media. Mothers, families, new parents, people who had never heard of Isabella Moro were now eager to buy her work. She barely had time to process it before the reality of success hit her like a tidal wave. She had no staff, no supply chain, no way to fulfill the sheer volume of orders pouring in. The demand was more than she had ever dreamed of, and suddenly the business she had fought so hard to keep alive was no longer just scraping by, it was thriving. She spent the next few weeks barely sleeping, balancing customer service, crafting, and the ever-growing weight of being a mother and a businesswoman all at once. But this time the exhaustion was different. This was not the same crushing despair she had felt in the past. This was the weight of possibility. Her brand was no longer just an idea, it was real, it was hers. The rain drummed softly against the window of a dimly lit apartment as Sebastian Lauren sat alone on his worn leather couch, a glass of whiskey Ballon loosely in his hand. The room, once filled with luxury and warmth, now felt like a cold, unfamiliar shell of the life he had once lived. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the television playing absent-mindedly in the background. He barely paid attention until a familiar name made him snap to attention. Tonight we feature Isabella Moro, the founder and CEO of Be Mayan, one of Paris's fastest-growing luxury children's furniture brands. Once an unknown single mother struggled to make ends meet, she has transformed her company into a multi-million euro enterprise, setting new industry standards and craftsmanship and design. The screen flashed with footage of her Isabella. Sebastian straightened, his heart hammering against his ribs as he watched the woman he had once called his wife appear on screen, poised and confident in a tailored navy suit, her hair swept back elegantly. The years had been kind to her, no more than kind. They had shaped her into something formidable. The camera cut to her sitting across from the interviewer, her expression composed but warm. "At first I didn't think I could do it," Isabella admitted with a small smile, "but I realized that if I didn't stand up for myself, no one else would. I had 2 children who needed me, and I refused to let my past define my future." The words hit him like a gut punch. Sebastian's grip on his glass tightened as he continued to watch, unable to look away. She had done it without him, without anyone. The show played clips of her walking through a stunning state-of-the art workshop, her workshop where craftsmen worked under her guidance, bringing her designs to life. The interviewer continued praising her, calling her one of the most inspiring entrepreneurs of the decade. Sebastian barely heard the rest. He felt as though the air had been stolen from his lungs. She had moved on, not just survived but thrived, and for the first time in years he felt something he hadn't expected: regret. It coiled in his chest, spreading through his veins like poison. He had convinced himself that leaving Isabella had been the right choice, that she and the children would be better off without him, that his mother had been right. But looking at her now, radiant, powerful, untouchable, he understood what a fool he had been. Sebastian had lost everything. His mother had stripped him of his position at Lauren Group the moment she no longer needed him, placing her trust in more obedient men. The wife she had chosen for him had been just as ruthless, using him as a stepping stone before walking away the moment his power was gone. He had gambled his soul for wealth and status, only to be left with nothing, and Isabella, she had built everything. Before he realized what he was doing, he was standing at her doorstep, his pulse hammering as he rang the bell. The door opened, and there she was up close. She was even more breathtaking than the woman on the screen. Time had carved her into something sharper, more refined. She was no longer the woman who had once begged him to stay, who had wept in the cold of their empty apartment, who had been crushed beneath the weight of his betrayal. She had become someone far greater. Sebastian swallowed the weight of the years between them, pressing heavily on his chest. "Isabella." She didn't flinch, she didn't gasp in surprise or demand why he was here. She simply tilted her head slightly, unmoved. He cleared his throat, searching for the words he had rehearsed in his mind, but nothing felt sufficient. His voice was rough when he finally spoke. "I saw you on TV." No response. He exhaled shakily. "I had no idea how much you've accomplished." Still she said nothing. He shifted on his feet, suddenly feeling exposed. "I just wanted to say that I'm sorry." Her gaze didn't soften. If anything, there was a flicker of something coldly amused in her eyes. "You're sorry," she repeated, her voice even. He nodded, forcing himself to continue. "I was wrong about everything, about you, about us. I let my mother control my life, and I lost the one person who truly mattered." There was a beat of silence, then she let out a small laugh, quiet, disbelieving. "You realized that a little too late." He flinched, but he pressed forward. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know that I regret it. I regret walking away. I regret not fighting for you, for her family." For the first time her expression shifted, not with sadness, not with longing, but with something far more devastating: indifference. And that was when he truly understood. She had let him go completely. She had outgrown him, outgrown the pain he had caused, outgrown the weak man he had been, and he no longer mattered. She took a slow step closer, her voice calm, unshaken. "You were right, Sebastian." His brows furrowed slightly. "What?" "We were never meant for the same world." A flicker of hope sparked in his chest. Then came the final blow. "But not because I wasn't worthy of you." Her gaze pierced straight through him. "It's because you were never strong enough to stand beside me." Sebastian felt the breath leave his lungs. The truth settled into his bones, heavier than anything he had ever carried. She had become something far greater than he had ever imagined, and he was just a man left behind. For a moment he thought he saw something flicker in her gaze, not sympathy, not anger, just finality, and then without another word Isabella closed the door. The grand hall of the Hotel de Crillon was filled with the hum of journalists, business executives, and industry insiders, all gathered for what had been advertised as a monumental business acquisition in the luxury home furnishings market. Cameras flashed and reporters whispered in anticipation. At the center of it all, seated at the long conference table draped in rich navy velvet, was Madame Vivienne Laurent, the woman who had once dictated the rules of high society with an iron grip, but today for the first time she was no longer in control. Across from her, poised and unwavering, sat Isabella Moreau. Vivienne's sharp gray eyes flickered over the documents in front of her, the weight of what she was about to do pressing down like a vice. The Laurent Group, once untouchable, once a symbol of legacy and power, had been forced into negotiations with the very woman they had discarded. Isabella had bought out the Laurent Group's high-end furniture division, an empire Vivienne had built meticulously over the decades, and now if the Laurent family wanted to maintain any presence in the luxury interiors market, they had no choice but to sign a deal that would bind them to her terms. A deal that placed Isabella Moreau, a woman they had once considered insignificant, at the head of the empire. A heavy silence settled over the room. The contract lay open on the table, awaiting Vivienne's signature. Every camera in the room was trained on her, every journalist waiting to document this moment, the moment she would be forced to surrender, not just financially but symbolically. Sébastien Laurent stood at the sidelines, watching in stunned silence. This was a nightmare he never could have imagined. He had always believed his mother was untouchable, that the Laurent name would forever remain a fortress no one could penetrate. But now, standing there, he saw with painful clarity that the woman he had left behind, the woman he had once underestimated, had become the force they never saw coming. He swallowed hard, his gaze drifting to Isabella. She sat straight-backed, elegant, completely unfazed by the tension in the room, unlike Vivienne, who gripped her pen so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Isabella's hand rested lightly on the table, her fingers tapping idly as she waited. She was calm, she was in control. Sébastien had always known his mother to be ruthless, but he had never seen her look like this, trapped, cornered. The cameras flashed again as Vivienne finally picked up the pen. For a moment she hesitated. Her entire life had been built on never bowing to anyone. She had orchestrated marriages, destroyed careers, and shaped men into kings. She had erased Isabella from their world without a second thought, confident that the girl would fade into nothingness. But she had miscalculated, and now she was being forced to acknowledge the one thing she had refused to believe she had lost. A muscle in her jaw tightened as she placed the tip of the pen against the paper. The moment the ink bled onto the contract, the reporters surged forward, cameras clicking in a frenzy. Madame Vivienne Laurent, the matriarch of the Laurent Empire, the woman who had once controlled the fate of everyone around her, had just signed away her power to the very woman she had sought to destroy. The deal was sealed. Isabella's lips curled into the barest hint of a smile. She extended her hand across the table. The cameras focused in on the moment that would make headlines across France, with every lens capturing her humiliation. Vivienne Laurent had no choice but to take Isabella's hand. Their fingers barely touched, but the symbolism was undeniable. Vivienne had been forced to acknowledge Isabella as her equal, no, as her superior. The room erupted into applause, industry leaders stepping forward to shake Isabella's hand, congratulating her on her triumph. She accepted each one gracefully, her expression composed, but Sébastien saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't doing this for revenge. She had already won the moment she had built her empire without them. This was merely a formality, and yet it devastated him. Sébastien remained frozen in place, watching as his mother slowly rose from her chair, her shoulders stiff with pride, even as the weight of defeat settled into her bones. The photographers snapped their last shots as Vivienne turned on her heel and strode toward the exit, her silence a final act of defiance. Sébastien looked back at Isabella, who was speaking with the group of executives, her presence commanding the room effortlessly. She had surpassed them all, and she had done it without him. For the first time since leaving her, he truly understood. Isabella Moreau was no longer the woman he had walked away from. She had become someone he would never deserve again. The golden afternoon sun bathed the city skyline in a soft glow as Isabella sat on the balcony of her penthouse, a gentle breeze teasing the edges of her silk blouse. From where she sat, she could hear the laughter of her two sons echoing through the open terrace, their tiny feet patting across the smooth tile as they played. The sight filled her with a warmth that no amount of wealth or success could ever replace. Her life had changed in ways she once thought impossible. She was no longer the woman who had been abandoned in a hospital bed, no longer the mother who had struggled to choose between buying diapers or feeding herself. She had built something unbreakable, a life of independence, success and freedom, and the most beautiful part, she had done it entirely on her own. Her phone vibrated beside her on the glass table, drawing her attention. She reached for it, expecting a message from one of her business partners, perhaps an update on the expansion of Mon, but the moment she saw the name on the screen, she stilled. Sebastian Lauren. For a brief second she did nothing, then with practiced ease she opened the message. "I'm sorry, Isabella. Is there any chance to fix what I broke?" She exhaled slowly, her fingers hovering over the screen. For years she had imagined what this moment would feel like, if he would ever regret it, if he would ever try to come back, and now here it was, the proof that he finally understood what he had lost. But the truth was, it no longer mattered. She had moved on. Without hesitation, Isabella pressed delete, erasing his words as effortlessly as he had once erased her from his life. A soft giggle pulled her attention back to her boys. She set her phone down and smiled as they ran toward her, their small hands reaching for her. Without missing a beat, she gathered them into her arms, their laughter filling the quiet evening air. Sebastian was a chapter long closed, a ghost from a past that no longer held power over her. This, her sons, her success, her freedom, was all she needed. At its core, Isabella Moro's story is not one of revenge, but of resilience, self-worth, and the power of rebuilding. It is a reminder to anyone who has ever been abandoned, underestimated, or broken, that their past does not define their future. In a world where many women are told they need a man, a family name, or societal approval to succeed, Isabella's journey shatters that illusion. She was discarded, left to struggle alone with two newborns, yet she rose not because someone saved her but because she saved herself. Her story speaks to the silent battles that countless people fight every day, the struggle of single parents, the weight of financial ruin, the fear of starting over, but it also offers hope. No matter how dark the beginning, the future is still yours to shape. Most importantly, Isabella's success is not about proving her worth to those who doubted her. It is about realizing she never ever needed their validation to begin with. To anyone facing betrayal, hardship, or uncertainty, this story is a promise. You are stronger than you think, and your greatest triumphs are still ahead.